perhaps is that I think if I'm thinking of my own government and sort of the Westminster government, so the government of England, the government that's sort of in charge of policies that directly impact England in terms of language, I think it's fair to say that they would probably do what's most expedient for them. So whatever our current sort of language policy, I think is very much monolingual. It serves the discourse of the nation, sort of one nation, one policy, one nation, one language. That we see that across all different contexts. That there's a sense that somehow multilingualism poses a problem for a nation and nationhood. That we can't have sort of that somehow nations can't be multilingual. So this reliance on a one language, one nation. So that's certainly, I think, the context for the UK, for England, and so the UK government obviously has, the Westminster government has a kind of challenge that we are four nations, and that those nations are not the same in terms of their language policies or their language practices. So Wales has a very different language policy, as does Scotland, as does Northern Ireland, and so they are much more embracing of regional languages, particularly sort of Welsh, and we see lots of really, really important work around re-establishing Welsh in schools and in local society, everyday lives. So there's been a real push since, sort of, it's been ongoing, for decades, but particularly since the 1980s, and that would, at cost to lots of people involved in that, lots of demonstration, lots of kind of political activism to get Westminster to recognise the role of those languages. So the devolution of those governments mean that they do have kind of agency to set their own language policies. So for those of us working in England who don't have that same sort of level of openness to engagement with language, are advocating for that. We continue to advocate for the government to listen. If there were a heavy monetary involvement, I'm sure they might listen more, but generally not. And I think maybe that, without being unfair, that's possibly similar across some of the other contexts that I've been familiar with as well. That there's that idea around what will maintain the status quo potentially, but the idea of policy.
Four different nations, they decide their own language policy based on the language diversity in their states, correct?
Yeah, and that's a really hard one battle, I think, and constantly the sort of government of Westminster tries, I think, we've seen sort of recent examples in other kind of social areas to kind of overrule, but on the topic of language, they have little jurisdiction at the moment over curriculum in those kind of contexts.
Thank you. Now let's go to India, where I don't know how many languages are there. There are different figures, 500, 600, maybe 1500. That's also something that I have heard from the media. So how does this language in education policy work in India? What are the kind of policy decisions that are made? And where is English language situated in such a multilingual context? 3 minutes, Professor Patel.
Thank you very much for this brilliant question. It's indeed a matter of pleasure for me to be with you this afternoon. I would like to say a few things about one particular aspect of language policy in India. In India, we have 21 major languages, and we have more than 100 minor languages, and hundreds of dialects which are as distinct from one another as two languages are. So it's really a difficult task for policymakers to decide as to how to go about making decisions finally. Now, all of us know that opinions are more influential and more powerful than facts. Views are very important. Perceptions, misperceptions are very important. Now, because we have English and Hindi and the mother tongue of the learner, three-language formula, we have three-language formula in India, what happens is English is given a special treatment. And Hindi and Marathi, for example, my mother tongue is Marathi. Hindi and the mother tongue of the learner, these two languages are given stepmotherly treatment. Right? Now, for example, as far as the teaching and learning of English is concerned, there are quite a few misconceptions or misperceptions. For example, even today in my country, people think that English is not cow milk. English is not buffalo milk. English is tigress milk. It's not everyone's cup of tea, for example. So what they mean by this is that it's difficult to learn English. to acquire this particular language. And even today, many teachers and parents and administrators